Welcome into Landmark, episode 10 of the Commitment Issues podcast. I'm Rob Cassidy, joined as always by wonderful co-host Woody Womack, and we are inching towards signing day here, Woody. It's an exciting time to cover recruiting, or as exciting as recruiting can possibly get for people that have covered recruiting for some time. How are you doing this week, man?
Well, I'm good. 2 weeks, the magic day until we can unfollow all these kids on Twitter. I know, really one of my favorite days of the year, just going through that list and hitting that unfollow button so we don't have to follow the lives of these teenage boys anymore as they move on to be teenage men at the college level.
Man, I'm pretty good at not following all of them. I'll pick and choose. I can't blanket follow these dudes because it's just too annoying. And I know Twitter has lists. In my old age, have decided to cast those aside and just play Twitter straight.
There's been some shifts on your list.
Some shifts in your list.
There have been some shifts on my list.
I used Twitter lists a bunch when they first came out. I remember I was like way in on them, and then at some point I forgot how to use them. I don't know how to use them anymore. I use TweetDeck, but I don't have multiple columns or anything like that. So I don't know. We sound like old men here, but I really don't think anyone uses Twitter lists anymore.
No, yeah, they may have done away with them. Who knows? I guess the first topic here for the week, as we move closer to signing day, is the final Rivals 250, our rankings release that dropped this week as we record this on a Tuesday. The 250 was released today. You guys probably will not hear this on this Tuesday, so it'll be in the past by the time anybody's listening to this. But a significant milestone there.
Yeah, the final rankings is definitely a big deal for us because that means no more ups and downs. Of course, it means every single fan base in the Rivals.com network accuses us of hating their school and moving up all of the Rivals commits because we do hate your school and we do love your school's arch rival, right, Rob?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's what we do. We sit down and make sure to really screw over the guys going to your school. And I joked today on Twitter that we just started this list at number 21 this year because we didn't want any of your loser schools to land a top 20 prospect.
Could you imagine the complicated algorithm that would have to be in place for us to somehow systematically screw over every single fan base as they all accuse us of? I mean, that would be nuts, right?
I would like to start at 150 one year. Yeah, all of your schools suck, and none of you get top 100 recruits. This list starts at 150.
Of course, we are joking. We love all the fan bases out there. That's what I tell the fans when they're getting on us on the boards. I tell them, look, I mean, you guys are fans. That's the whole point. That's why you pay money to read Rivals. You're going to be passionate about these guys, even though you don't know them. I just wish somebody give us a little credit every now and again when we do get guys right, especially when we deviate pretty far from our competition. There's a lot of groupthink in this industry in terms of rankings, and I know you and I both try to make sure we're making our own evaluations, not ranking guys high based on specific offers or based on where somebody else might have them ranked. We do the best. To be honest, I'm gonna let it be known to anyone listening to this podcast. We put so much effort into those rankings. We travel more than any other company. We had the entire Rivals analyst team at both the Under Armour game and the Army game. The whole squad was there, not one or two guys, not one, like some of the other companies. Everybody was there at both places, making sure we saw as many people as possible. Those All-Star games are great evaluation tools, great environment for us to see guys going head-to-head in full pads. So check out those rankings.
The other thing people don't really know about the process, I think, either, is that they think that, Rivals is like a group think. If somebody would listen to these rankings calls and hear some of the fights and the cursing and the almost like, personal jabs that go on, it's not a dictatorship. There's a lot of fighting and a lot of arguing, and sometimes you don't get your way. So sometimes, when a guy is ranked maybe a little bit lower than you think, not everybody at Rivals disagrees with you, but, it's the way things break.
Well, there's been plenty of famous guys who have been argued about over the years. I'm trying to remember who the most polarizing guy probably was in terms of internally, not versus another company. I know the year Deshaun Hand was number one, we had a spirited argument with certain people on this podcast pushing for Myles Garrett to be number one. He ended up finishing number two, and I remember a very immature person, I don't know, I can't remember who it was, continued to refer to Myles Garrett as the number one player in the country the entire rankings call. And they're going forward all the way into the next ranking cycle. So
look, my biggest victory was definitely last year with Christian Kirk, who had a great freshman year. I kind of stood on the table for him, yelled at a lot of people about him, and I feel pretty good about his freshman year.
Yeah, he was great. He was pretty polarizing as well. Trent Irwin was a guy that I think we made a 5-star last year at the end. He had a very quiet freshman year. There were some disagreements there. So it is interesting, especially when we look back. I wish we did, we've had this analyst team in place now for a few years. We're probably one cycle away from all of us have been doing these rankings together for 4 full years, and that's when the braggadocio will really begin, when we can kind of talk about who got stuff right, who got stuff wrong. But let's move on, enough to talking about ourselves, but that just gives you a little window into how the rankings go. You can find those right now at rivals.com. But now it's drama. It's 2 weeks away, Rob. We're 2 weeks from signing day, almost to the day. And let's run down through some of these crazy stories that were happening. I'm going to start first with a little bit of a diatribe about Mecole Hardman. We talked about him last week. He's a guy that, is, as we said, he's really enjoying the process this week. This past weekend he went to Ohio State for an official visit, and this may shock you, he put out another list.
There's been some shifts in his list.
There's been some shifts on that list.
He has shifted his list, I don't know how many times. I mean, he actually did a video with Bleacher Report, I think, to name his top 10. And I'd be curious to cross-reference that top 10 list with the top 6 he listed.
It's ridiculous. I like Mecole as much as the next guy. He's been great to be around, but come on. I mean,
right.
Really.
So he continues to mess with everybody, really mess with the fans. I think, I was actually texting with him tonight, because I was trying to get him on the phone with our Ohio State site to do an interview about what was going on. He tells me, hey, I might not go to Alabama this weekend. And I said, well, why not? And he said, I'm just getting tired of traveling. And so Alabama, the school he named his leader, keep in mind, when he arrived at San Antonio at the Army All-American game. So I think if we're making predictions, I think we both said it last week, I still see him going to Georgia. I do think he likes Ohio State a lot. I think he likes the idea of playing in that offense. Him and Dwayne Haskins have kind of hit it off with a bit of a friendship. But I think it would be an epic steal for Urban Meyer to go down there and land Hardman. So let's move on to a guy from your region, Rob, who we both saw and like, a guy we actually pushed up in the rankings. I personally wish we would have pushed him higher. He just didn't kind of have the showing that we had expected at the Army game. That's Raekwon Davis. This guy, 6'7.5", 6'8".
Yeah, he looks like a ladder. He's a monster, no doubt about it. He kind of harkens back, and you made this comparison once, away from the show, to Byron Cowart, who was our number one player in the country last year. They've got kind of sort of the same physique, and not identical by any stretch of the imagination, but in the way that they strike you when they enter a room as a guy that looks like a guy that has an NFL-ready body as a high school student. But the news about him this week is that he has lost his mind on Twitter, or his phone was compromised, and I say that with air quotes because, I'm not accusing Raekwon of anything, but anytime your phone gets compromised, in air quotes, it's usually you're the one that compromised it. But what happened was he decommitted from Alabama and committed to Mississippi State, changed his bio on his Twitter, and then, several minutes later, wiped that away after people were calling him and asking him if he flipped and reporting that, he had committed to Mississippi State, and said that his phone was compromised by a friend, and that didn't happen. Now he's back in limbo, trying to choose between the two schools. We have him marked in the Rivals.com database as an Alabama commit, which this might be a situation where he's committed to both coaches and just hasn't, and this is me speculating, obviously, and just hasn't told whichever one that he's not going to that he's not going there. And I guess we'll find out. And this has potential to really, really get crazy as we approach signing day. This is one of those stories that could really escalate even more quickly than it already has, and could be really a joy to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting because, the my phone's been hacked thing, that was a big excuse in the early days of Twitter when athletes would say something stupid. which I really enjoyed that. But this is a guy that, actually the confusion spilled over even to our own Nick Kruger and maybe perhaps yourself, because somehow you guys did an analysis video on him committing to Alabama.
Yeah, here's what happened. I just gotten up, and I got a text from Krug, and this was in the food poisoning throes that we'll get to later in the show. And it was like, can you give me an analysis video on Raekwon? And I had missed the entire thing. I just thought he was late getting to do a video on Raekwon Davis committing to Alabama, and he was getting ready for signing day. So I was like, I hadn't seen any of this yet that was going on Raekwon's Twitter. And so I just recorded it for him and sent it to him. And it wasn't until after he had already done that it had dawned on me what had happened. And I was like, oh. Yeah, so it was very odd. It was an odd situation.
So right now, Raekwon is committed to Alabama. I think we both expect him to end up at Mississippi State, and I think he could be a guy like Chris Jones who was entered the draft this year. He's going to be a first or second round pick most likely. I think he's a future NFL guy for sure. So do you think?
Well, there's also buzz out there that maybe he could end up at a junior college. I think it's going to get real interesting with Raekwon Davis before it gets less interesting. I just have a feeling that we have not seen the wildest of this yet.
All right, on to the next crazy situation, which, one of the nicest kids in the class, I think Demetris Robertson, a guy that you and I have both been around for years now. He's been to pretty much every type of rivals camp that we've had since, I believe, 2013, which is pretty impressive considering it's 2016 now. He's traveled with us all over the country, been to a lot of different events. His recruitment...
7-on-7s. This guy plays football every weekend in the offseason somewhere.
Oh, that's right. He played for Pro Impact last year, 7-on-7. So he's definitely making his rounds all over the place, and just a kid that's always fun to talk to. And he's honest with you. I don't think he doesn't know where he's going. It's 2 weeks from signing day. He really doesn't have a clue. He canceled his Alabama visit last weekend. I asked him what happened. He said it's a lot of distractions was his was his quote about why he didn't make the visit. And so then Cal was in for an in-home visit. Notre Dame was in for an in-home visit. I called him last week. His phone was disconnected. I called him today. We had a nice conversation. So there's all kinds of – he's all over the map. I personally think it's really going to boil down to, at this point, Notre Dame versus Alabama. Notre Dame, seems to be really getting at the academic aspect, which, his family thinks is very important. And then Alabama, of course, where he's been committed forever. He actually has a twin sister. This is a weird story. That doesn't live with him, that lives with his mom. They live about 4 hours away from Savannah, and his twin sister enrolled at Alabama A&M to run track. So they didn't grow up living in the same house, which is unusual even though they were twins. So stuff's all over the map. He said they wanted to go to school together. She was supposed to go to Georgia. There were reports that
he's not going to Alabama A&M then.
Right. He's not going to Alabama. Well,
shocking.
And I asked him where she was going to school, and he told me Alabama. And then the next day, and of course, someone from our competition was, firing shots on Twitter saying it's Alabama A&M, not Alabama. And I asked him, and I said, which one is it? He's like, I think it's Alabama. Alabama A&M isn't the same thing. He had no idea.
What do you mean? Oh, man.
So he didn't know. So I do like the way that Notre Dame is trending. I've been predicting Alabama for a long time. I do think Georgia is really on the outside looking in, even though they're trying to hang around. But so that's where we're headed on. Demetris.
Can we use before we move on? Can we use the Robertson Alabama A&M thing to underscore a point that we've made on this show a million times, that these kids, top flight recruits, are not as in tune to the college football situation as you are listening to this show. They're not super fans. They don't know who the new hot assistant coach that got hired to your school is. They don't know who that guy is. They have to do research. That they're just not as in tune as people assume they are. I think that when Auburn hires a new offensive coordinator, Auburn fans assume because they know his name that the top 100 recruits in the country know his name. They don't. Most of them did not know who Jim McElwain was when he was hired as the head coach at Florida.
Yeah, that was interesting. I actually got that reaction from a lot of Tennessee targets when they hired Bob Shoop. The Tennessee fans were very excited, and I got a lot of never heard of them from some recruits. And it's not that they're it's
just
not,
how it is.
Right. It's not that they're stupid. They're in high school. They have they're worried about who's dating who and what's going on and whatever high school drama you have, and they know the coach that's recruiting them, and they know the head coach, and that's pretty much it.
And they know that Rachel, the dance team member, sits behind them in third period English. That's what they know.
Right, exactly. So one more crazy recruitment before we do a little team specific stuff. Riley Ridley, I guess we're going to call him that, Cavin Ridley. Now, this is a weird situation. You can kind of explain it with him changing his name, changing schools, and everything.
Yeah, no, those All-Star weeks run together, so it was the Under Armour game that Ridley was at. And I'll take you through this exactly what happened. Andrew Bone, who does a bang-up job covering Alabama for Rivals.com over at Tide Sports, was down the field after the Under Armour game, and Ridley just was talking to Bone and was just like, in passing conversation, was like, "I'm committed." And Bone laughed. And he's like, "No, I committed." And he's like, "Really? To who?" He's like, "South Carolina?" He's like, "When'd you commit?" He's like, "Right now. I just told that guy over there." And he's like, "What guy? You can't just commit to some guy on the sideline." And it ended up being some other reporter from something called Touchdown Alabama, but he had called the South Carolina coaches thereafter, and somewhere before this, if I can backtrack a little bit, he had decommitted from his name. His name is Cavin Ridley. He, midweek at Under Armour, decided he wanted to start going by Riley Ridley, which most people had never heard of before. So after decommitting from his name and committing to South Carolina, he recommitted to his name briefly, was signing notes app tweets from Cavin Ridley, decommitted the next day from there, and then changed his name back. It was an absolute just mess. And now that's been maybe the craziest recruitment so far that I've covered in my region anyway.
Well, we should note that he's the younger brother of Calvin Ridley, who I'm sure everyone remembers, a 5-star from last year, was running all over the field in the national championship game. And the confusion was, one is named Calvin, the younger one is named Cavin, the same name without an L. It actually caused so much confusion at our regional camp in Miami the year before. This was before you were down here in the Southeast, Rob, that because they both signed up at the same time, the registration people assumed it was a duplicate, and when Calvin Ridley came to the camp, he was told he wasn't registered because they kicked one of the two of them out. So we had a 5-star show up at our camp and get told, "We don't know who you are, you're not registered," because Cavin had already checked in. So it's an unusual story. He ends up at Georgia, right? Is that where he
Yeah, he ended up at Georgia. He just enrolled at Georgia, too, before anybody really knew he was committed, before he shared anything with the media. So, they found him, our Georgia site, who also does a bang-up job, found him in the registration, in, the student directory, and was, called me and was and I'm like, I don't know. And then he decommitted from his name a second time, and he is now Riley again, and he's Riley the Georgia Bulldog.
What was his name in the registrar's documents? That's what we need to know, and that's what his name.
I think it was Cavin, but you can't tell a kid he can't decommit from his name. He's Riley in the Rivals.com database, and I believe he's Riley on Twitter now.
No,
but it's a situation where I'd watch it closely because there's a chance we could see another name commitment flip before signing day.
Well,
for sure.
With my name being Woody Womack, I have to give him a lot of credit for going with the alliteration first name. I mean, he probably always wished he had the same initial there, Riley Ridley. So great job by Kirby Smart, who actually. My producer Nick Kruger and I had a chance to bump into. The bump rule was in full effect this weekend when Nick and I ran into Kirby Smart. We can't tell too many of the details, but boy, really, really laid back guy. He seemed really relaxed and actually knew who I was, Rob. So not everybody out there is ignorant to who Woody Womack is.
Yeah, well, I still think you're a loser.
Well, I'm definitely a loser. That may be saved as a drop for the future from Nick. But let's go into some team specific stuff. I think nobody had a better week on the recruiting trail than Ohio State. Landing Benjamin Victor, a Rivals 100 wide receiver. They also landed Dwayne Haskins, who was one of the people that was very controversial when it came down to him making the Rivals 100 this past time in terms of the analyst debate. And then they also picked up a 5-star linebacker in Keandre Jones. Is that his name? Do you?
Yeah, and they flipped both of them from Maryland. We should note that. And, Maryland still has not really transformed into the Oregon of the East, as they were, have been billed for some time now. But that's, a stunning blow for Maryland for sure.
Well, what do you think about, especially Benjamin Victor, who I believe told you a story about when he almost I remember he was going to commit to Florida. I think we all expected to.
Yeah, he had a date set earlier before the season, in the last offseason, to announce. He was going to announce on Larry Bluestein's radio show down here in South Florida. And he's told me since then that he was 100% going to commit to Florida that day. He goes up the weekend before that announcement was scheduled to happen to Sound Mind, Sound Body, which is a camp they have in the north. Does that, swings over to Ohio State to just kind of look around, I think talks to Urban a little bit, comes back from that, cancels that announcement, and all of a sudden starts talking about how Ohio State and Florida are neck and neck in his recruitment. Then, when it comes time for him to actually announce, he doesn't even keep Florida as a finalist. It was down to Ohio State, West Virginia, and I can't remember the third school off the top of my head right now. Oh, Tennessee, because he had visited Tennessee, the day before he announced. Obviously, it was pretty clear quickly that it was going to be Ohio State. I think that people were a little bit surprised that Florida didn't make that final cut, but I don't think it shocked anybody. But it was really, an incredible move from Urban Meyer to kind of stop that commitment from happening. Not that commitments really mean anything in the year 2016, but to, kind of nip that in the bud and give himself a chance to land Victor, who, has tremendous upside, I think. At the college level and give him a chance to land him. And I mean, you can't knock Urban. And I think that he's got a reputation as a great recruiter for a reason. And this is, just another peg in that board.
Well, of course, Benjamin Victor on one of Officer Friedman's 10 most wanted commits in terms of prospects he was not impressed with at the Army All-American game, as if you follow along with his tweets on Twitter. But I think Urban Meyer has done this now seemingly every year. It pulls one big guy out of Florida. I think Torrance Gibson was that guy last year. So I don't think he's had the impact of recruiting in the Southeast like maybe we thought he would when he originally got hired. But another example of him closing well. They have a chance to get the number one class in the country. I think LSU is going to charge hard with some of the guys that they're going to add down the stretch. But they're still recruiting at an elite level, and it's going to be a situation where they are reloading, not rebuilding. And I would expect them to be right in the mix next year as well. The school right in your backyard, which actually spent a lot of time in my backyard today, Miami, the U up here recruiting hard. Mark Richt trying to flip some of these Georgia commits, guys that he recruited during his time in Athens. Malik Young, another one of Officer Friedman's most wanted from Coconut Creek High School, actually flipped. Was it earlier this week or was it late last week that he made that call?
I think it was late last week, but we've been saying on this show that was going to happen since the moment Rick was hired at Miami. Young from Coconut Creek, from the U's backyard, I think always wanted to go to Miami if it was a stable situation. So when the coach that he was committed to took the job in his backyard, it was a no-brainer for everybody involved. I'm actually surprised it took as long as it did for him to end up committing to Miami. And that's the kind of pull you have when you're Miami and you hire a guy that's got an established name. Because, Miami's always going to have some aura to it. It's not what it was 15 years ago, but it's not a school without an aura. And I think that if you can keep that aura and you can combine it with a name coach or a coach that people down here know or a coach that has had success in the SEC especially, you can really have the chance to rebuild something special there at Miami. And I'm not saying it's a slam dunk. I'm not saying that Miami is back, but I'm saying that they've got a better chance of being back than they did the day they hired Al Golden, for sure.
Well, and another guy that I think I would expect them to flip at this point, Randricus Davis, affectionately known as Dreek, to myself and producer Nick Kruger, one of our favorite recruits that we laid eyes on a couple years ago. Actually made him a 4-star when he had no offers right out of the Jason Howell playbook. And he now has been committed to Georgia. Looks like he's on flip watch. I think I would expect that to happen sometime in the next week or so. Is there anybody else you expect them to close with? What you mentioned about them having a little momentum. What is the feel down there? I mean, you were out at some events recently. Are people feeling good about Richt? Are they optimistic? What kind of vibe did you get?
Yeah, I think they're optimistic. I don't think anybody's ready to declare the U being back. I think the two most important things on Richt's plate in South Florida right now, as far as signing day goes, are to get Amon Richard, the wide receiver, to recommit to Miami, and to hold on to Sam Bruce, who, despite being committed, is still looking around. He may be visiting Florida this weekend. He's just coming off a South Carolina visit. Bruce is one of those guys that I don't think it's going to surprise anybody if something wacky happens on signing day with him. He's given me no reason to think it will happen, but he's also given me no reason to think that there's no way it's not going to happen. I could definitely see him being one of those signing day surprises. I don't think it's a certainty, but I mean, it's definitely a task, I think, for that staff to keep him, because he is the linchpin of that class, and I think he represents something bigger than just one player in one class. I think holding him kind of will make a statement in a way.
All right, well, another school that I want to talk a little bit about, briefly at least, Oklahoma, all of a sudden recruiting the Southeast and trying, they've been trying to push into Tennessee. They've done a decent job of at least offering kids down here in the Southeast as they try to recruit nationally. We see them do very well in California. I know a lot of the kids out there always mention them.
In Fresno, for some reason, there is like this weird Fresno to Oklahoma pipeline that Tari Bird and L.J. Moore a couple years ago were a part of. They do very well in that area for whatever reason.
Maybe they'll put V's on the back of their helmet like Fresno State. Fresno State, which
man, let me tell you what, that is and I don't want to go too much on a rant here, but I've been to that stadium, and when the visiting team comes out to play against Fresno State, to get to the field from the visitors' locker room, you have to walk down the side of a highway. So there's like a college football team in full pads and helmets just walking along the side of a road to get into the stadium. And cars are like honking, throwing things out the window. It's very, very strange.
Well, no wonder they have no problem heading out to lovely Oklahoma. But I wanted to talk about some of the Southeast players they've added to pick up. Austin Kendall, a guy that has really impressed us. He moved up way I think almost 100 spots in the rankings. He's kind of yo-yoed up and down, but quality quarterback and a guy I think is going to fit really well into that system, especially considering he's a sneaky athlete, as they say, Rob, in code words. And they're also working hard on Elise Mbembasi, who is
whose name also kind of sounds like a Hanson song, which points for that.
Sounds like I was talking in reverse, Missy Elliott style there. And then Velus Jones is the guy I wanted to talk to about with you. An intriguing prospect. He's committed to USC. I think we expected him to commit to Oklahoma a while ago, but now he's kind of waffling. What are you hearing on him?
We'll give you the quick Velus Jones timeline here of what's happened with him. There was a time, roughly a month ago, where he was dead set on decommitting from USC and committing to Oklahoma. That was going to happen. It was a 100% certainty. USC begged him to get on campus before he did that, so he gave them that. Now he's come off of it, and now talking to him and talking to the people around him, it's become I'm 100% legitimately 50-50 torn between these two schools. It's going to be one of these two schools. USC has really done a nice job on hanging on to him when all hope seemed lost for a long period of time, actually. But now, they're in play. There's a chance now I can tell you that he will actually stay there. If you would have asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have told you there's no way he will sign with USC. Now I think there's a 50% chance that he signs there and a 50% chance he signs at Oklahoma, and these next couple weeks are going to be huge for both of those programs to convince him. I think that he is one of those guys like Demetris Robinson who really is uncertain on where he's going to land, and it'll be real interesting to see what happens with him.
All right, so the Sooners, they're never going to pull 5 or 6 guys out of this region per year, but if they can get 1 or 2, especially a 4-star guy, and then a developmental guy, or even somebody like Samaje Perine, who's I believe is from Alabama, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a million of them down there. Michael Perine is going far out of this class, and word is there's a third one coming. that I think is a 2018 that we'll see at our camps this year. I don't know much about him, although the fact that he carries the same name and the same bloodline. So we'll see what he's got.
All right, so let's move on to South Carolina school. I want to talk a little bit about. Added a commitment from Kobe Smith late last week, big-time defensive tackle. I guess at least a big body. He's a high 3-star, someone who, I was surprised when I first saw him a couple of years ago. I thought for sure he was going to be a guy that Alabama would target, schools like that, just because he kind of fits the mold of exactly what they look for at a defensive tackle. 6'3", 6'4", 325 pounds, just a big guy who takes up a lot of space, can eat up some blockers. Anyway, he committed originally to NC State, flipped from NC State to Kentucky, was set to enroll early, actually signed his papers with, oh man, hold on just a second. My dog is making some weird noises.
And that's the level of professionalism you can expect from the Commitment Issues podcast.
I guess he stopped. Nick will cut this out. But anyway, he committed to Kentucky, signed his papers to enroll early, was all set to go, and then during the dead period actually decommitted from Kentucky. And they of course had already announced his commitment. It turned out that Kentucky couldn't get him in to enroll early, I guess was the disconnect, and then somehow South Carolina thought they couldn't get him in either. They ended up working out some type of a workaround in terms of whatever his credit situation was.
Workaround.
I wanted to say a loophole. I don't know if we could call it that, because I didn't see the kid's transcripts. I don't know what happened. I know he was on track to graduate early. That school has a lot of players graduate early, so they should know what they're doing there. Anyway, he ends up pulling the old Ridley on us, just shows up at South Carolina, enrolls in classes, and now he is a Gamecock. So big-time steal from South Carolina to steal somebody from...
See, at first, when you said pull the old Ridley, I assumed he decommitted from his name. So now, but no. I mean, I think that can mean a lot of things at this point.
Yes, exactly. He changed his name from Kobe Smith to Riley Smith. But... It's such a random name to pick, Riley, of all the...
It's got to be his middle name. It has to be his middle name.
Let's hope so. So anyway, it's part of a bigger trend for South Carolina of them, since Will Muschamp's got there, they really loaded up this recruiting class. They flipped a lot of recruits. More importantly, put an emphasis on local guys. They actually got T.J. Brunson, a high 3-star linebacker who had been committed to Louisville. So, boy, they're just pillaging the state of Kentucky. And after the beating we took from Kentucky fans from our anti-tobacco segment last week, just adding fuel to the fire, I guess. So anyway, 9 commits, I think, is what I wrote down here on our notes since Muschamp took over. And they're really trying to add talent there and kind of flip things around. I've been impressed with what they've been able to do in such a short time. I think, it remains to be seen if Muschamp can kind of spin that into winning, especially in the East, which seems to be on the rise with Georgia getting a new coach, and then of course Tennessee, being one of the teams to watch for. So, but just a short piece there on the Gamecocks. They're adding a lot of commits. I like what they're doing. Let's move on to.
Speaking of Tennessee, we should maybe touch on them, right, and what they're kind of doing in my neck of the woods down here in Florida.
Yeah, it seems like they picked up a commitment last week from Marcus Tatum, who is a 3-star offensive lineman. They're in the mix for Jordan Woods, who's, I believe, is he a 4-star defensive end.
He is.
Then, of course, they have a commit from my old stomping grounds, Maple High School, in Carlin Filsamy, which I was scolded for spelling his name wrong, thanks to autocorrect on my phone yesterday.
And now they're trying to flip Zach Moss, who was once a Miami commit, now a Utah commit, and Tennessee is hoping that he goes on his 3rd commitment and trying to flip him. I spoke to Zach today, actually, just before we started recording the show, and Zach, said he was very interested in Tennessee, and that's a quote from him. And he's going to decide in short order, he says. It won't be a signing day thing. He says he thinks he's going to have a final decision between Utah and Tennessee within the next week and a half. So we'll see what they can do. Tennessee's never stopped trying to recruit Florida. They've never really had in recent past, they've never had great success in the state. It seems like they're starting to get a little bit of momentum now, and I think that's essential for a team that's located where they are geographically.
Yeah, they hired Larry Scott. They paid him gave him a nice chunk of change to come up there. He was the interim coach with Miami after they made the coaching change away from Al Golden. He was well liked by the players down there. Now he seems to be well liked by recruits. What do you think his impact has been?
Well, first of all, every time anybody says Larry Scott, I think of the Pac-12 commissioner, so we're going to just start calling him Riley Scott, if that's fine.
Okay, yeah, we can change his name to Riley.
Right. Anyway, so Riley Scott, he's got a name down here. Not so much, again, with some of these players in the 2017 and 2018 class, they don't know who Riley Scott is. But, it's about the 7-on-7 coaches and the high school coaches and people that can tell these players, explain to these players who he is and why he's important in the region, why he's been around the region a little bit. And, he's really good in the Tampa area. He's got some connections in South Florida. I think you're going to see guys from the Naples area and, around there start to really consider Tennessee a little bit more. It's going to be real interesting to see what happens with Zach Moss, because Zach Moss is a South Florida high school kid who has some options, who has been committed to Utah with two of his high school teammates to whom he's very close. So flipping him in Tennessee obviously is the more flashy program, I think. It's in the Southeast. It has the history that Utah doesn't have. But at the same time, the draw of high school classmates going to college with them, I think, is very strong as well. So I don't think it'll be an easy flip. But if they do accomplish that, I think it's definitely a milestone for Larry/Riley Scott and could be a sign of things going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of these guys, are in the high 3-star range. I'm not sure what Tatum is ranked. Of course, the controversial ranking of the Naples running back has caused a lot of conversation on the Tennessee board. Jordan Woods, I believe, was a guy who was hovering around the Rivals 250 for most of the process, and I think he's still a 4-star. And then, of course, Zach Moss was a guy, like you said, who flipped from Miami to Utah. Can probably read the writing on the wall there. Do you think it's important for them to kind of get over that hump and get into more of the Jordan Woods territory, or do you think, this is a good place to start, maybe rebuilding those connections that they used to have? I mean, they used to.
Absolutely. You and I have talked so much on this podcast about how recruiting Florida is something you need to build up to. You start landing the right kids from the right programs and the right 7-on-7 teams, and then you're rewarded later. You take kids that are good and that can help your program, but you also take kids that, while being good and can help your program, can also help you land other kids down the road. It's how it works down here. Like it or not, it's just part of the game, and you have to play it if you're going to be an out-of-state school recruiting the top-level athletes in Florida.
All right, so we finally got Tennessee into the show. So, Vols fans, I hope you're happy. We've been trying to do it for 10 episodes, so we finally got you in there. So please send all your angry emails to rivalspodcast@yahoo.com. Wanted to give a quick...
Yeah, or go on Twitter and send them to @RileyCassidy.
That would be a good... @Rob Cassidy's taken. Maybe we can get you @Riley Cassidy as a alternate Twitter handle. Maybe you could use that as your... I've heard there's...
I'm going to secure it right now.
I've heard there's some Rivals analysts who keep a second account to spy on people. So maybe that Riley Cassidy could be your account to do such nefarious acts. I do want to do a quick plug here. A reminder to subscribe on iTunes. Our numbers actually, our most listened to episode so far was episode 9. I guess you guys missed us when we were gone. But find us on iTunes, subscribe. More importantly, leave a review because that helps with our placement. We spent about 2 months on the front page of the new and noteworthy section, and then they finally bumped us off. I guess we're not noteworthy or new anymore, but check us out there. And, of course, follow us on Twitter. I'm @RivalsWoody. Rob is @Cassidy_Rob. If you want to hear why he doesn't have Rob Cassidy as his name, you can listen to last week's episode. So, Rob, now let's get into our schedule. Just because the All-Star games are over doesn't mean we stopped traveling. We were both at 7-on-7 tryouts over the past few weekends. First, why don't you explain to the people what 7-on-7 is, just briefly, because I think people hear the name of it and they assume it's something, but a lot of people don't know what it is or what goes on. So a quick 30-second synopsis on what it is.
It's a series of tournament. It's touch football pretty much with no linemen. So it's, a quarterback, your receivers, a running back, and then, no linemen, your linebackers, defensive backs, safeties and corners. And it's, a passing league pretty much. I mean, there's no handoffs. It's a really good way to evaluate quarterbacks, I think, and wide receivers too, and coverage skills of defensive backs. And, in the Southeast and in California, for that matter, there's an event every weekend. Most of the top prospects in those two regions play for, 5 or 6 different teams. But it's a good way to see a lot of very good players together in one place.
Well, and more importantly, it simulates, especially for those positions at defensive back and wide receiver. I'm not so much linebacker and running back, but it really simulates game situations. So it is a valuable tool, and it's just like playing we all played with our friends, two-hand touch. It's the same situation.
No, you did. I played tackle because I'm a man.
Well, I played a lot of tackle too. I think if anyone were to see the two of us, I think they'd be more worried about being tackled by me than you, old Rob.
My dad can beat up your dad.
So anyway, it's a similar situation. So we go to these things now. The tryouts it takes it a level further, because basically you have people trying out to make this team. It's essentially like a football camp, but players just going through drills and one-on-ones in a non-padded situation. So what was your experience being out there at South Florida Express a couple weekends ago, and then, of course, this past week you were up in Tampa? Did you see any celebs? I mean, I saw the owner of the Miami Heat actually 2 years ago at the Express tryout. So were there any celebs sightings?
Yeah, no, it was kind of short on celebs this year, and there could have been a million celebs at Unsigned Preps in Tampa, but I was dying with food poisoning, which I'll get to later, so there could have been, or I could have hallucinated and seen a celeb. It was really a rough go. But, the South Florida Express is the oldest South Florida 7-on team. They've got NFL, alumni, and, obviously college football alumni as well. It's a big event every year. Everybody wants to make that team, between them and the Fire, which is the other really big team in South Florida. Those events are huge. You see most of the top South Florida talent, skill position talent anyway, is out there. And even the ones that aren't, linemen are out there watching. In fact, Navon Donaldson, who's a Miami commit, a giant 300-plus, 50-pound-plus tackle, tried out and made the team at tight end. It's amazing to watch him move out there. Defensive backs can't get around him. He's got some pretty decent hands for a big guy, too. So you'll see him on the circuit, and you and I can laugh at him. It's only funny to watch him run because he is so huge. But he's not bad. There's a reason he made that team. So you see the talent out there. It's good to build relationships with players too on that extent. I had a good time. I have a good time every year at that event. But.
So a lot of people are branding it as AAU basketball or whatever. But in my experience, a lot of the 7-on-7 people we deal with are above board, and actually most of them spend a lot of their own money and time to try to help kids get noticed by college coaches and stuff like that. So don't knock 7-on-7. It's an off-season event. It's something that it does get tired. By the end of 7-on-7 season, we're all ready for it to be over. But at the same time, it doesn't deserve maybe that bad rep that everybody gives it. So we're not going to complain about 7-on-7. We're going to complain about other stuff now, Rob. It's time for Rants and Recommendations. Everybody's favorite segment. Do you want to start this week?
Yeah, I guess I can start because I've been kind of alluding to, and it's not really as much of a rant as it is a sob story because it's on me. The whole food poisoning bout that I got the night before the Unsigned Preps tryouts was because I elected to eat at something called Taco Bus, probably. It's either that or a hamburger that I got at a place called The Refinery. I believe called The Refinery in Seminole Heights in Tampa. But, more likely it's something called Taco Bus, right? If it's a nice hipster restaurant hamburger versus Taco Bus, which we're eating probably within 4 hours of each other. So I'm going to guess it was Taco Bus if I'm throwing Taco Bus under the bus. Pun definitely intended. For no reason, then I apologize. But, man, it was just it was bad news, Taco Bus in South Tampa. I covered an event with food poisoning. Drove back to the hotel, which was not very far, and had to stop and take a nap in a gas station parking lot because I was going to fall asleep or throw up or crash my car or some combination of all three. Probably should have done a better job writing up the recap of that event, but I did what I could. The worst part about it, though, was that I had to public speak. So I arrive, and I didn't know I had to public speak. And they were like, do you mind doing this recruiting seminar? They brought in, somebody from the NCAA and, a graduate assistant from some college to talk to the parents about the recruiting process. And they're like, all right, Rob, why don't you tell the parents about what you do and Rivals.com, and I'm like up there trying not to barf. It was bad. So that is that's my rant for the week. It's not so much a rant as it is a sob story and an apology to the good people at Outside Preps.
Well, guess what? I'll add a rant onto there. I'm from Oregon, as we've mentioned several times in this show, where they call food trucks food carts most of the time because they're usually in some sort of.
Well, this was a food bus.
Okay, so that's what
I should specify.
That's what I want to say. At some point, probably 6 or 7 years ago, food trucks went from being, which we called them roach coaches, where they would roll up to a construction site or something like that and sell whatever taco bus type food that you had. At some point, they switched from that to being a gourmet place where you could buy chicken and waffles, which, is a real sore subject for me because if you give me chicken tenders and put it in a waffle like a taco, that's not chicken and waffles. You know what I mean? That's just some weird, I don't know.
I agree.
Right, some weird
Look, man, I'll tell you when it happened. I'll tell you when it happened when we went from Roach Coach to Hipster Food Truck. It was before 6 or 7 years ago because when I was in my last year of college, I believe, there was a show on the air called The Great Food Truck Race. It was hosted by that Tyler or whatever on the Food Network. And the reason I remember this show is because it came to my college town, and when you're going to college in Manhattan, Kansas, as I did, and some crappy Food Network show rolls into town, it's a huge deal because it's Manhattan, Kansas. And I just remember people like chasing these trucks around town and acting like it was Jennifer Aniston. It was very strange. But it was maybe at peak food truck at that point, and that was, I don't know, years ago. So I think it was longer than 6 or 7 years ago when these things got real hot.
Well, whatever. Food trucks are washed.
No, I agree. I concur. I think that they had their moment in the sun, but it's over now. And, it's cause of death, food poisoning for Rob. I probably will take some time off from eating at food trucks, buses, or carts, or anything of the sort. Food Riley's also out.
Exactly. Ridley's, I don't know what kind of food Riley, I was trying to think of a food that rigatoni,
Riley Ridley's Rigatoni RAV4.
Yeah, there you go, exactly. So I actually have a food-related rant and recommendation this week. We're recording this on Tuesday night. I'm actually in the process of moving. There are boxes all around me. I noticed today, though, it was National Popcorn Day, which, we can complain about there being some stupid national day every day of the week now or every day of the year. But on Twitter, they have this new Moments section, which they annoyingly put one tab over to get us all.
Moments is washed.
Yeah, boy, talk about washed. But anyway, they try to get us to click on it. So I accidentally clicked on it today. And what pops up but, National Popcorn Day, the number one trending topic. And, then, instead of a nice bowl of popcorn, which, I've been known to enjoy as anyone that knows me can attest, Nick and I sample popcorns at stadiums all over the country. There's a bowl of popcorn with some type of sprinkles and like sugar put onto it. It's National Popcorn Day. Let's have a bowl of regular pop. What's wrong with regular popcorn? Popcorn is already good. Like it's a salty snack with butter on it. At what point did we say, hey, I need to add M&Ms? Speaking of which, the official M&Ms account tweeted out a photo and celebrate National Popcorn Day with our M&M inspired recipe. I don't need M&Ms in my popcorn. It's popcorn already. All
right, so where does the line draw here for Woody Womack then? Is it like putting weird things in popcorn, or like is cheddar corn?
No, cheddar corn sucks.
Like cheese.
No, sucks. Caramel corn out.
So a popcorn traditionalist.
That's right. I like to keep it classic, and that's where my recommendation comes in. I try a lot of popcorns.
My recommendation is Oral Redenbacher's microwavable popcorn.
No.
You better not be.
See, that's what you would think. I'll actually have a whirly pop, which I use quite a bit, which is a thing that you cook on the stove. You crank the little handle, and it mixes the
confession, I have a movie theater popcorn machine. I do. I'm looking at it right now. It's awesome. It's very, very great.
Well, in college,
it's maybe the coolest thing in my house.
In college, I did have one of those in my apartment, which I procured through student funds at the University of Central Florida, which is a whole different story. But yeah, Rob used to have a movie theater in his house that tells you what kind of money he makes as the Southeast.
It just tells you how cheap it was to live in Texas, not anything about what I make.
Well, so anyway, so the Whirly Pop is great, but if you are looking for a short-term solution, I would highly recommend going with the Pop Secret home style popcorn. You can get the bags over the counter. You know, we're talking 2 for $4 for 3 bags. It is by far the best microwave popcorn you can get. Don't go with the movie theater butter or anything like that. This is by far. So that's my recommendation. That's my rant. Eat your popcorn with butter, salt, anything. Other than that is ancillary, and it's not a sweet. No sweets, no sugar. You know, no kettle. I don't even like.
No, I agree. We can't have popcorn. I agree on the sweets. We can't have popcorn going the way of French toast, which is like that is a dessert masquerading as a breakfast. That's not a breakfast food. That is a dessert, and somehow it's like fibbed its way onto breakfast menus.
So anyway, I guess that wraps it up. You have a recommendation or no? Other than
yeah, my recommendation is not to get food poisoning. But otherwise, great show this week, Riley.
No, my name is not. I already have alliteration name. Your name could be Carly Cassidy.
Whatever works.
So that wraps it up for us. We already plugged everything except our boy M Deuce,
Deuce. Yeah, I was gonna say, get us out of here, M Deuce.
M Deuce, by the way, all of a sudden quickly becoming the official music of the Rivals.com network, as he is working on some themes for our other podcasts. He's also sent us some stuff for a video project that Nick and I are working on as well. So check him out. A lot of good beats, including the Lowrider Music? I can't remember the name of this song.
We should shout out Nick Kruger, who is, our wonderful producer, who I would never yell at in a public setting on the show. He does a wonderful job, and I just wanted to thank him publicly.
Yeah, if you ever want the real story why we went on for 2 weeks, you can read that in Nick Kruger's tell-all book, Behind the Commitment Issues podcast, where he explains Rob Cassidy Diva podcaster.
He explains that I became Hollywood for a week.
Yeah, Rob flipped on us, went NWO style to make our wrestling reference.
All right, we'll see you guys in episode 11. It's been great.